Hey, make sure that you have this paper out. This is just a way for you to review before our quiz. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining each one, but I will show you what you should have done. If you still have concerns about how to do it, please come see Mrs. Pearson or myself. Number 1 is 3.2 times x. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we would divide both sides by 3.2. That is a 3.2, by the way. 3.2 divided by 3.2 becomes 1. We have left 1x. And now we need to figure out what 14 divided by 3.2 is. And yes, you can use a calculator, but let's get used to also understanding why things are the way they are. If 14 was a multiple of 3, it would be close to 15. So I'm assuming my number, my quotient here should be close to 5. So I'm going to move my decimal over one place. That means this decimal here gets moved over one place and brought up. Does 32 go into 140? Yes, it will probably go in about 4 times. So let's do 32 times 4, 8, and 12. It's not going to go more than that. So we know the 4 goes here. I subtract off 128, and that is not a 6, it's a 0. So 10 minus 8 is 2. I borrowed from the 4 to make it 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. I can't even read my own handwriting here. That's 12. Bring down a 0. It's 120. I can only probably get it to go 3 times. You get the idea. Check it on your calculator. Number 2, this is division. The opposite of division is multiplication. I usually try to show multiplication with parentheses. That way there's no question what's going on here. So multiplying both sides by 3. This is really like 3 over 1. And if I multiply 3 over 1 times x over 3, I get 3x divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And on this side, I have 6.4 times 3. 6.4 times 3. This should be 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 6 is 18. With a 1 is 19. Move the decimal in here. The answer should be 19.2. Number 3, I'm adding 5.6 to x. So the opposite of addition, or to the way to zero it out, is to subtract 5.6 on each side. When I subtract 5.6 from 11, that means I need to add a decimal in there for 11. So I can subtract. This is 11.0. If I have to regroup, I'm going to take this and make it 10. Borrow from the 1, make that 0. 10 minus 6 is 4. I already have 10 here. See that? 10 minus 5 is 5. My answer is 5.4. One more. Number 4. If I'm subtracting 5.5, the only way to get rid of it, if you notice, this is really, I'm either subtracting 5.5 or I have a negative 5.5, and the opposite, or the additive inverse, is to add 5.5. When I add 5.5 to 12.1, I get x equals 17.6. Okay, make sure you have this information. I'm going to pause the video so that I can slide it down. Okay, I've scrolled down to number 5. If you look, it says 1/2 of x equals 8. I want you to just use some logic here for a minute. That means I'm taking half of a number, which will give me 8. Now, because I'm multiplying times x, I could, whoops-a-daisies. I want to divide by 1/2. The opposite of multiplication is division. I should have divided over here on this side. Ignore this line over here. 1/2 divided by 1/2 is 1. X equals, and I want you to think about this for a second, I'm dividing 8 over 1 divided by 1 over 2. Anytime we divide, we really don't divide fractions. We always have to change it to multiplication. So I write it as 8 over 1. And I multiply, I keep change flip, by 2 over 1. 8 times 2 is 16. That makes sense. 1/2 of 16 I know is 8. On this number 6, I'm dividing by 2. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to multiply by 2. Always show with parentheses because the parentheses make it very clear to understand what's going on. Now this is 2 over 1. The 2's cancel out. I get x equals, and 1.3 times 2 is 2.6. Down here, I'm adding 1/5, so I should subtract 1/5. And this is actually a really nice, easy one. If I have one whole thing and I take away 1/5 of the whole thing, that means I have 4/5 left. Number 8. Again, I'm subtracting, or I have a negative 3/4. The opposite of that is to add 3/4. That's a 4. If I add 3/4 here to negative 5/8, of course I have to find a common denominator. So that's my first job. So I have x, these cancel out. And on this side, let's find our common denominator. Looks like it's gonna be 8. I multiplied by 2 here to get the 8, so I have to do the same thing to the top. It looks like a 6. Now this is negative 5/8. Oh, so wait a second, I have a negative and I have a positive. The signs are different. Find the difference. The difference between 5 and 6 is 1, so it's 1/8. What do I have more of? Do I have more positives or negatives? I have more positives. Our answer is 1/8. Make sure you have everything here. I'm going to scroll down. Next page. Now this is multiplication, so I need to divide. If I divide 1.5 into 3.5, I'm not really sure what we get. So give me a second and I will check. Hopefully you understood how I got this far, but when I divided 3.5 by 1.5, I got 2.3, and the 3 is repeating, so I put the repeating bar over it, and I always write that that's what x equals. Number 10, I need to get, whoops, sorry about that, I don't know why it's writing like that. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do a little erasing. Okay, sorry about that. Start thinking about what you need to do. I have to do the opposite, so I'm going to add 1/3 here, and I'm going to add 1/3 here. X equals, and of course this has to be rewritten as 3/9. So my answer is 8/9. Down here I subtract 2/7. That means I have to subtract 2/7 from 11. 11 doesn't have a denominator, but it's really 1. So to rename this with a common denominator, I'm going to get a 7 on the bottom and 77 on top. Oh, it's a very large number. And that means I'm going to get 75 over 7. And for right now, I can leave it just like that. Number 12, I'm going to add 1/8. And I'm going to add 1/8. This time, whoops, this is my denominator that I need to change. I'm going to change it to an 8. That means 3 becomes 6. These cancel out. X equals, now don't forget, this is really a negative because that's what it was when it was 3/4. So the signs are different. If the signs are different, I subtract. 6 minus 1 is 5, and it's 5/8. And in this case, I have more negatives, so it's negative 5/8. Now, I didn't get through everything, but that was 10 minutes worth, and I don't want to keep you more than that, but that should give you a pretty good idea whether you get it or not.